So it's no secret to anyone who's taken a cursory look at my channel, or any social media for that matter, that I love Amphibia. I pulled an all-nighter after The Hardest Thing dropped to post my most popular fan art of the show, which is available on Etsy as a print if you're interested. I've made a crap ton of fan art and animatics of the characters, cosplayed and in sprig with my sister.
Spread against the world!
And yeah, I have this stuff too. Setting aside my qualifications to make this video, they're honestly just my way of showing off my cool stuff like a 6-year-old at show and tell. The show genuinely impacted me and was just what I needed to watch at the time that I did so. It's a fantastic show, and maybe one day I'll get a cringe fail Amphibia tattoo to permanently etch my brain rot onto my skin. There's so much to be said about what the show does right. We could talk about the animation, the overarching theme of change, the surprisingly mature ending, or the fact that Anne has one of the best main character arcs since Aang from ATLA. Fight me. Fight me on that. But there are a lot of wonderful videos out there that already look at the show as a whole and address these overarching story elements with the nuance they deserve. I'll put links to some of my favorites in the description. I don't want this video to feel redundant or go on for like 10 hours, so I've decided to zero in on one aspect of Amphibia that is sometimes glossed over by video essayists and fans. I find that to be kind of funny because this is the thing that makes me want to get that cringe fail Amphibia tattoo. I mean, you saw the title here, so you already know it. We're talking about girl drama here. Toxic female friendships, let's go! My poor roommate. I'm trying not to disturb her. While many Western cartoons either focus on all-male friendships or co-ed dynamics, Amphibia's nucleus lies within the dynamic among Anne, Sasha, and Marcy. This is extremely important to me, because friendships that solely consist of people who identify as girls grow and develop in a way that I hardly ever see represented in Western cartoons for all genders. Before Amphibia, my gold star example of girl drama in media was the 2009 film An American Girl, Krista Stands Strong. No, seriously, that's how starved young girls are for stories that represent the turmoil of female friendship. Although, before we go any further, disclaimer, gender roles. I want to be clear right here and now and say that I'm not the one forcing gender roles onto these very relatable fictional female friendships. The patriarchy is. Being raised a little girl, I find myself relating a lot to how adolescent female friendships are portrayed in Amphibia. Conflicts between girls are always more complex and twisted than the ones between boys. Part of it comes from young girls realizing that they have to keep up innocent appearances at all times, lest they be targeted by others for not fitting the roles adults have forced onto them. This leads to a lot of underground seething and gossiping that bubbles up into these intense conflicts that could have been prevented if girls weren't pitted against each other in a competition to be the perfect archetype of their gender. These friendships are different because girls and boys are raised differently. It's not my fault that society is fucked up. I'm just here to point out how Amphibia depicts friendship drama in a way that is very relatable to anyone who is raised as female. Okay, with that out of the way, it's time to analyze my favorite aspect of one of my favorite shows. I'm so fucking ready, you guys. I love this show so much. It's the best. Oh my god. 1. Friends since the beginning. At the beginning of the episode The Third Tower, we see how Anne, Sasha, and Marcy became an inseparable trio. The three of them were in kindergarten when they met. Anne and Marcy must have been family friends earlier, since his flashback only shows how Sasha was added to the group, or at least that's how I like to see it. The more important thing, though, is to point out that, yeah, this is how 99% of childhood friendships are formed. If you're not meeting the kid of your parent's friend, you're probably meeting them at school or on the playground, and what draws you to different people as a kid is nothing more than, that person has good vibes. They're my bestie now. When you're older, friendships are normally built on shared interests, but most 5-year-olds already have a lot in common with each other. I really like that the show gave us an exact backstory moment of how the three of them became friends. It shows that even though their friendship as of now is still strong, it wasn't built on anything super deep or complex. Again, like how most childhood friendships form. This sets the foundation of how their paths end up diverging. Not only are they at risk of being separated because of Marcy's move, the three of them have already shown signs of divergence. At this age, they're starting to develop and explore their own unique interests that don't quite line up anymore. 2. Growth, development, and drama. Oh yeah, baby, puberty and hormones aren't the only thing that cause change when you get older. Far from it. What I find to be the key factor that makes a kid go from childhood to adolescence is the formation of core interests. Despite how cringe you'll find them looking back, these interests will most likely stick to you as you transition into adulthood. I mean, this is why I'm here right now. For Marcy Wu specifically, those interests are video games, anime, tabletop role-playing, and other especially nerdy activities. Although we don't see much of their baby mode friendship, the way Anne and Sasha talk about Marcy forcing them to play Creatures in Caverns or watch War of Warlocks give off the vibe that these hobbies and interests have only been things that she's recently been getting into. The kind of excitement Marcy radiates is something I can feel in my bones. When I was 12 and getting into anime, I was Marcy Wu. I was that annoying friend with the weird interests every 2 months that I just had to share with my best friend, or it felt like I was going to explode. But while my bestie was pretty receptive of my new interests and entered a weeb phase of her own with me, Marcy might as well be gushing about her new interests to a wall with how unresponsive Sasha and Anne are. While she's discovering these aspects of herself that make her unique, her friends are ignoring her because they don't really get it. There are more than a few examples of Sasha and Anne not getting the references she makes, being frustrated with her tendency to hyperfixate, or flat out saying they don't remember or even care to remember the things she tells them about.
Okay, oh my gosh! Remember that game I tried to get you and Sasha to play, Creatures in Caverns? No. Well, it turns out newts are just like cephalons. From Shadows of Zelnoth! Anyway, I just roleplayed like your typical artificer rogue, and next thing I know, boom! I'm the chief ranger of the Newtopian Night Guard. Were those words? I know what you're thinking. The Resistance stands no chance against the Lich King's undead horde. Totally. But little do they know, the whole battle is just a distraction so that our heroes can sneak into the castle and destroy the Crystal Crown of Tantamore. Whoa! Spoiler alert! Sorry. It's just such a good movie and I get carried away.
Marmar, I'm joking. I don't actually care.
I actually find it really interesting that Marcy is the one who starts changing the most notably among the group. It contrasts with her desire to keep the friendship as similar as it was before this mild rift. With all her new favorite things not resonating with her best friends the way they resonate with her, she must have felt the need to push her interests harder and harder in order to make sure they still had something to talk about. It seems that her parents' decision to move out of state was the reality check that made her realize that things are no longer going to be the same when it comes to her friendship with Anne and Sasha. Marcy feels like she has to do something before this gets out of control. Despite being skeptical about the music box's validity, she still ends up being the person who puts her friends in a sticky situation. One where they're going to be forced to change so much that the cracks in the foundation of their friendship will no longer be something they can easily ignore. Marcy brought them to Amphibia with the intent of keeping everything the same, but instead all of them were split up and placed into different societies that inspired them to change in very different ways. Some of that change will be good, but not all of it. Luckily for Anne, a lot of this change is positive. Wyrtwood was the best community for her to end up in. A lot of her tendencies to take shortcuts and avoid responsibility got directly challenged by simply existing in this little rinky-dink frog town. She had to work to gain the respect of the townsfolk. She needed to help out around the house lest disaster strike on her poor surrogate frog family's farm. She learned that being someone's best friend meant needing to compromise and not resort to peer pressure. Funnily enough, we sometimes find Anne forcing her interests of weird teen magazines, cats, and reality TV onto Sprig and other Wyrtwood frogs in the same way Marcy forced her interests onto her. It's almost like tweens are especially impressionable and make their interests their identity. These habitual changes that were unforced on Anne were things that she desperately needed, especially as the member of the trio who would sit back and enable her more eccentric friends to get her into trouble. Her journey of developing confidence and self-love is honestly another topic in and of itself. It's often brought up in a lot of other Amphibia video essays because of how powerful it is. Again, the best cartoon main character arc since Aang Avatar The Last Airbender. I love seeing a kid with wishy-washy ideals grow into someone with a clear and mature outlook on the world while remaining the fun and lively person they were beforehand. Peak content! Anne's positive growth, however, is contrasted by the negative influences Toad and Newt society have on Sasha and Marcy, respectively. While Sasha is training with Grime, who enables her destructive, violent, and manipulative tendencies, Anne is learning that she can't make reckless choices without consequence. While Marcy continues to treat the world she's in like a VR RPG with awesome side quests, Anne is learning that Amphibia is a living, breathing world inhabited with communities that are filled with complex individuals and not quirky NPCs. Although all three girls find these changes to be favorable, their clashing ideologies come to a head when they reunite, only to realize that the cracks in their relationship, which were forming before they were transported to Amphibia, are larger than before, ready to shatter the moment their opposing worldviews clash. 3. The end of the world. Girl fights. So, what happens when you reunite with your friend only to realize that everything about them has changed in an unfavorable way? Girl fights. But imagine if your bestie who starts to bully you when they find out how two-faced you are had a sword. That's pretty much what happens in the season 1 finale of Amphibia. And then imagine realizing that your other bestie had been lying to you about something important. But instead of faking a gay older brother in order to come off as more cool, they sent you and your other bestie to a completely different world with them, with the intention to do roleplay across different universes until the end of eternity. All you have to do is forget that you've been disconnected from your family and everything you've ever known. Remember, it's no big deal. Anyways, that's True Colors. There's something about combining the outlandish, fantastical plot of an action-adventure kids cartoon with girl drama that really speaks to me. Because I, too, was a 12-year-old girl once. And let's be real, when you're 12, finding out that your best friend that you trusted had been lying to you is on the same level of tragedy as a natural disaster. Amphibia pairs those heightened emotions with actual high-stakes battles in order to create a level of tension that makes you empathize more with what these characters are going through. It's honestly brilliant. Obviously, the season 1 and 2 finales are where the idea shines the brightest. Take Reunion, for example. While the main plot of this episode revolves around the Toad Rebellion and the sword fight between Anne and Sasha, the actual driving force of these events is the relationship between these two girls falling apart. We wouldn't have these big dramatic fight scenes or the Toad Tower escape without Anne figuring out that Sasha is going to sell out her surrogate frog dad in order to help both of them get back to the human world. Sasha thinks doing this favor for Grime will ultimately be beneficial in helping her in Anne's quest of finding Marcy and going home. But Anne has had enough of Sasha's manipulative and pushy behavior. Instead of sitting back and letting Sasha force Anne into making choices she's uncomfortable with, Anne stands up for herself. And she finds support in Sprig, highlighting a perfect contrast between toxic and healthy friendships. There's a lot more to be said about Anne and Sasha's relationship and how it's impacted by Reunion and its aftermath, but we're gonna save that for a fruitier section of this video later on. First, though, we have to take a look at the wild ride that is True Colors. True Colors is the most talked about episode of Amphibia, and for good reason. Not only do we get answers revolving the music box and the strange behavior of Andreas behind closed doors, we also see multiple different examples of how trust can be betrayed. But because Andreas isn't a 13-year-old girl, we're not going to delve into his betrayal of Marcy. That's an example of a toxic dynamic between a child and who they thought to be a trustworthy mentor. What we're going to focus on instead is Sasha and Anne's friendship breakup and Marcy's betrayal of both Sasha and Anne's trust. What I find to be most heartbreaking about Anne finally making the decision to cut Sasha off is the realization that what Sasha and Grime did might have been more beneficial than everyone thought. Even so, the viewer ends up empathizing with Anne's hesitance to believe Sasha when she voices her concerns about King Andrias. We understand why Anne refuses to hear Sasha out, making it hurt more when we find out that Sasha and Grimes' suspicions were correct. What's infinitely more heartbreaking, though, is Marcy's breakdown when her friends realize she sent them to Amphibia on purpose. You can see her frantically trying to justify her choice to keep this from her friends. The "I gave you this" line always hits super hard, like genuinely. And then you read the official Marcy's journal only to find out that she spent a lot of her time in Amphibia contemplating whether or not to tell her friends what she did. At first, Andrias tells her not to say anything about it when she opens up to him, hoping to use her vulnerability as a tool to nullify the prophecy. "I told him everything, Joe. Everything. That my dad was going to make me move across the country, and I found a book that mentioned the Calamity Box and other worlds. That I tricked Sasha and Anne into opening the box, but I didn't think it would turn out like this. I thought we'd be together and oh, I'm just so scared of what they'll say when they find out what I've done." King Andrias was so understanding. He wiped my tears and told me it was probably best if Anne and Sasha never found out. I never meant any real harm, and they might not understand my good intentions. He had such kind eyes, but there was real pain behind them too. I think he really did understand, in a way no one ever does. But as she continues her adventures, she starts to doubt his advice and vows to tell them everything when she reunites with them, only to back out on her choice like 20 entries later. As her bond with Andrias grows, she feels more justified in her choice to not tell Anne and Sasha the full truth, thinking that they'll be elated when they realize they can go to multiple different worlds and have endless adventures with each other. A small part of her doubts this, but the three of them are best friends. They'll understand because she loves them, and they love her. Honestly, regardless of the whole being taken away from family for an extended period of time in an environment with crazy world-ending stakes, a breach of trust that would have been more trivial would have still wounded the three's friendship, greatly. There were already cracks forming due to Marcy's changing interests, Sasha's increasing need for control, and Anne's lack of self-love. Again, something trivial, like, for example, Marcy continuously forcing them to join a Creatures in Caverns party, or one of Sasha's more risky plans getting them into serious trouble, would have easily triggered a fight and a friendship break. The only difference is that they were put in a magical frog land with the intentions to fulfill a prophecy. Sasha and Marcy continue to make changes that they think will benefit the group without communicating them. Anne's a little different in that she's not often a choice maker, but she's definitely an enabler of her friend's bad behavior. It may sound like I think their friendship is toxic and unsalvageable, and half of that is true. Yes, these behaviors are toxic and remind me of the friendships I had with other girls as a kid, but a lot of adolescents go through this little shit phase. How else are they going to learn how to be a good person when they grow up? And sometimes the most toxic decisions are made with the most genuine and loving intentions. 4. When I was 13, I had my first love. Oh yeah, baby, it's time for the obligatory gay tangent! Woo! I accidentally bumped my mic there, and Sprig fell over. At this point, it's my brand to insert queer perspectives and shipping into any of the critical analysis videos I make. I've justified this by telling myself that if no one else is going to point out the positive impact of queer readings and shipping on critical analysis of media and fandom culture, then I gotta be that guy. Regardless of if you like it or not, shipping and romance are what tend to keep pieces of media alive in fandom. But setting aside the importance and validity of shipping culture and fandom for another video, the outright confirmation of Sasha's bisexuality adds a new layer of complexity of her possessive treatment of Marcy and especially Anne. It's no secret that I'm very attached to Sasha and as a ship, and while I will talk about their dynamic with an obvious bias to it, it doesn't negate the legitimate evidence of Sasha having an unhealthy crush on Anne. Let's start with a close reading of Sasha's behavior towards Anne and reunion, shall we? The opening flashback of the episode lays a solid foundation of what their friendship was like prior to their reunion in Amphibia. Sasha is clearly protective of Anne and thinks she knows best how to celebrate her birthday. Yes, by ditching class and playing around, there's definitely something in it for Sasha, but you can tell that she's genuinely excited to hang out with her best friend one-on-one on her birthday. Unfortunately, the fun gets cut short when Anne realizes that she's going to be late for the birthday party her parents planned for her. Sasha instantly calls out how childish her family party is going to be, and when Anne shows an ounce of embarrassment towards it, Sasha instantly concludes that she is the only one who knows how to give Anne the best birthday ever, despite the fact that she's been making Anne uncomfortable since they left the school. It's almost like she feels threatened by the possibility of Anne prioritizing her family over her, as irrational as that sounds. Obviously, Anne doesn't feel comfortable ditching her family, but luckily Sasha knows how to get back to her senses.
We're meeting up with Marcy right now. End of discussion.
This is straight up peer pressure, and Sasha knows this, but her constant need to be in control of everything stops her from realizing that she's hurting someone she loves. Regardless of how toxic it is, she doesn't want Anne to pay attention to anyone else but her, or Marcy sometimes, like a little kid wanting to keep their crush all to themselves. Fast forward to present day and we already see Sasha being hostile to the new friends Anne made, especially Sprig.
Hey, I'm her bestie too. I guess that makes me your bestie-in-law.
Does it?
On top of that, her brazen insults and jabs at them show that Grime has influenced her to be more physical and offensive. It's just like how she reacted to Anne's parents wanting to spend time with her, except this time, Sasha's more open about her disapproval of Anne's found family. When Sasha presents Anne with the overtly sapphic demand of riding in a heart carriage with her, seriously, a heart-encrusted carriage! She's taken back by Anne's request to bring the planters with her. She pauses for a moment before pretending she doesn't mind. But she does, especially when you see how quick she is to grab onto Anne's hand the moment they get out of the carriage. Once again, Sasha tries to assert her dominance as the friend who knows Anne best. She calls Anne out on her sudden change of heart about frogs, and when Anne explains that she's no longer disgusted by them, Sasha resorts to pampering Anne in order to remain the object of her affection. This is like straight up love bombing, although I don't think the 13-year-old Sasha Waybright understands that. Realistically, she just wants to spend a relaxing time with her best friend that she hasn't seen in months. And if that means Sasha has to pamper her before she brings up her nefarious intentions to sacrifice Hot Pop, then she'll do what she can to get this friendship back in control. Even so, Sasha's not at all fazed when Anne freaks out about this. She's used to having to persuade Anne into going along with her demands, so in Sasha's mind it's no different than getting Anne to spend time with her instead of her parents. So when Sasha catches Anne attempting a prison break with the citizens of Warpwood, she is both disappointed and frustrated. She relents that she's doing all these things for Anne's good. Sasha resorts to drastic measures in order to get Anne on her side. End of discussion is basically a threat when things go too far in her eyes. If Sprig wasn't there to show Anne a direct example of what healthy friendship looks like, she probably would have reluctantly gone along with Sasha's plan. But instead, she fights back. The sword fight on top of Toad Tower is something they both need to do in order to confront the state of their relationship. Sasha especially needs to be shown the consequences of her abrasive and possessive behavior. The tower exploding after Anne reiterates her choice to not back down against Sasha is a pretty overt metaphor of their friendship crumbling, and despite it, Anne still wants to hold on. Faced with what she thinks is her inevitable fate, Sasha realizes that maybe Anne was right to cut her off, and finishes the job for her.
Hey, Anne. Maybe you're better off without me.
If it weren't for Grime being able to save her at the last second, those words of regret would have been Sasha's last. This is all enhanced by Lean On Me playing in the background of this heartbreaking moment. That's what Anne had been doing up until now, but in order for her to emotionally heal, she has to let go. And if that isn't peak sapphic tragedy, I don't know what is. The aftermath of reunion shows Sasha doubling down on her desire to take back control of her and Anne's friendship, by any means necessary. She tries to justify it by needing to train in order to never lose a battle again, but Grime has to point out that she's not hung up on losing a measly sword fight. She lost a friend. A best friend. He demands that Sasha has to face her true feelings, so they can figure out where to go from here. Unfortunately, Grime is kind of a bad influence on Sasha when it comes to enabling her violent tendencies, so even though he's able to help Sasha be aware of the problem, neither of them are going to go about fixing it in a healthy way. We end up seeing this in Beryl's Warhammer, when Sasha learns that Anne and Marcy are figuring out how to get back to Earth without her. She's downright offended by their audacity to not seek her out before doing so, as if she hasn't spent all of her time plotting revenge against the Planters and Anne for their betrayal. Despite this, Sasha needs Anne and Marcy to think she's changed as a person in order for her and Grime's world domination plan to work. So, when she's able to locate them at the third tower, she has to act as if she's a changed person. She has to get back into Anne's good graces, pretty much. Marcy encourages Anne to take Sasha back, despite the fact that Anne had told Marcy about their fight and the complex feelings they have surrounding it. It borders on toxic peer pressure again, and the innate need to continue the sisterhood among female friends without fully opening up about their problems. The only difference, though, is that Anne is confident enough to express her boundaries to Sasha. Honestly, if it isn't for her and Grime's plan to seize Newtopia, this would have been a great step forward in rekindling their friendship. Sasha knows this, and she starts having second thoughts when she sees how happy Anne is to have her back as a friend. This back and forth in Sasha's mind culminates in their True Colors fight, where Sasha has to deal with the fact that Anne has cut her off. She wasted all of her chances and is reaping the consequences of it. It's tragic and gay, and the amount of yearning looks exchanged during the lead up to Sasha's betrayal is innumerable. Now, if you don't think that's sapphic enough, there are other examples of the Calamity Trio being very fruity. Hi, sorry, Sprite me, because I forgot to record this mini Anne gay segment, so here we go! Anne straight up calls other female characters hot, like Sadie Croker when she was young.
So, you want to stay here and look at more pictures of hot Croker?
You read my mind!
And when she first talks about Sasha in her journal entries, it starts with this. Sasha Waybright, my hero, my villain, my savior, my downfall. Like, okay, Anne, go off. No amount of backtracking and just kiddings is going to hide your yearning for her. That entire entry shows Anne reflecting on her friendship with Sasha up to her warping to Earth, and it shows that Anne was possessively holding on to Sasha as much as Sasha held on to her. Anne relied on Sasha to make all of her decisions for her, and that led Sasha to become especially protective of Anne. Anne reflecting on this shows that she's ready to try and fix things between them. But we'll get to that later. Okay, on to Marcy now. The show itself doesn't give us many super in-depth examples of Marcy being in love with her friends, given that she's not around much to do so. But you read her journal and you instantly know that she's put the same amount of unhealthy emotional investment into their relationship as Anne and especially Sasha have. Again, I find myself relating a lot to this aspect given my old and healthy attachments to female friends. I was also a young teen when I started developing a possessive attitudes towards my friends that, looking back now, was me crushing on them and not knowing it. Anyways, at the end of season 2, all of the girls are separated from each other once again. There's a heavy feeling of loss in their friendship. I mean, how else are you going to feel after going through something that intense? All 3 girls are left with lasting regrets, and it almost feels like nothing will ever mend their bond. But it's not too late. They can save this friendship. 5. Growing up and moving on. Season 3's strength comes from its ability to show how far the cast has come since Season 1. When Anne returns to her parents, they're baffled by how responsible and capable she is now. Of course, she still makes bad judgments and blunders, but she owns up to them in a way she never did before she went to Amphibia. And when Anne returns, she instantly catches on to how Sasha has changed since their last encounter in Newtopia. When Sasha faced Andreas and saw how much of a manipulative dictator he was, I feel like she saw a little bit of herself in him. Andreas could be Sasha in a world where they did take over Newtopia and she became bitter to her friends, desperate for control. Luckily, this isn't the world she's in, and she vows to make change instantly. It doesn't help that the frogs of Wartwood are instantly trusting of her on the basis of Sasha is Anne's friend. It causes her guilt to build and build until Grimes snaps and tells her to face her fears. Luckily, Grimes been through some positive change of his own, so it's not as detrimental as it was last time. So she finds Anne's journal in the basement of the Planter home. And, like the episode title blatantly states, this is a turning point for her. A chance to make positive change and use her strengths for good. Honestly, I wish we got to see more of Sasha bonding with the citizens of Wartwood, catering to their needs and helping them tune into their strengths as she forms a formidable resistance. Well, I guess that's what fanfiction's for. When Anne returns, she instantly notices how different Sasha is. Maybe a little too different? After everything, it's understandable for Sasha to want to relinquish control in order to show Anne how much she's changed. But Anne doesn't need that. The fact that Sasha is looking out for Wartwood citizens and respects their abilities and strengths is enough to show Anne that Sasha's changed. After a close call and a much-needed talk, they begin a partnership. Ah yes, it is indeed true that in Commander Anne, Sasha is revealed to be attracted to women. And then there's Marcy. While we don't get to see much of her in Season 3 for obvious reasons, what we do get is seeing Marcy realizing the errors of her ways and coming to terms with the fact that she can't force Anne and Sasha to be the exact kind of people she wants them to be. The moment where she confronts Aldrich and rejects her empty fantasies is really powerful. None of the choices Sasha and Marcy make throughout the story are unforgivable. You could counter that by pointing out the attempted murder and sabotage, but this is an action-adventure cartoon about talking frog planets, so that automatically raises the stakes by like 80%. Also, my bestie in Christ, these are 13-year-old girls. Look me dead in the eye and tell me you weren't a selfish little asshole at 13. Unless you are 13, which, like, you'll get what I mean in 3 years at least. Actually, Anne understands that she's a scrappy little shit more than any 13-year-old ever. God literally asks her to take their place, and her instant answer is, I'm a minor, so no. Amphibia shows that even the most troublesome children are capable of positive change with the right support system. The mistakes a child makes and the subsequent lessons they learn from them are what turns them into a well-adjusted adult. Those blunders don't define who they are, and they never should. We see this clearly when we flash forward to the Calamity trio in their early 20s. By the way, the ending of Amphibia is perfect to me. A lot of fans have mixed feelings on the ending, given that there's a chance Anne, Sasha, and Marcy will never see the ones they bonded with in Amphibia again. And while I find that part to be a beautiful portrayal of change and letting go, I want to focus on another criticism the ending gets. It makes no sense that Anne, Sasha, and Marcy drift apart as friends after what they've been through together. Hate to break it to you, but that's a pretty common thing that happens to childhood friends as they enter adulthood. Unfortunately, a side effect of growing up is loosening the reins on close friendships in order for you and the person you love to pursue your dreams and goals in life. While we don't get to know too much of what things were like during the 10-year time skip, Marcy's journal tells us that she made friends almost instantly after she moved away. A really notable section of the journal, though, is when she reflects on her friendship with Anne and Sasha after the move. As for Anne and Sasha, we did text almost every day for the first year or so, but eventually our new lives took over and we just needed to talk less and less as time went by. Trust me when I say it's not as tragic as it sounds. In fact, it felt healthy. Normal. It didn't mean we loved each other any less. Needless to say, we're still the greatest of friends, even if we don't know every little detail about each other's lives. Some bonds just can't ever be broken. When I first read the journal, that excerpt hit me really personally. And I bet it hit hard for a lot of other adults who found themselves charmed by Amphibia. Sometimes friends drift away, and that's okay. But of the things you let go, you might be surprised what makes its way back to you. That's the final line of the show, and it's extremely powerful. I think it's an important lesson that a lot of young people will benefit from learning. Friendships aren't maintained because you hang out with them almost every day. The importance of your friendships with others is the lasting impacts they leave on you as a person. 6. Conclusion. My best friend that I've known for like 20 years now is someone that I only see about 2 to 4 times a year. We were neighbors as kids, so even though we never went to the same school, we could still hang out all the time, especially in the summer. The memories of our childhood that come to mind the most when I reflect on the themes of Amphibia are the playdates we would have where we would spend hours upon hours talking about how we would live together when we grew up. We got along so well that it felt obvious to us that we'd stay just as close as adults. So we'd plan where we'd move together, the pets we wanted to adopt, the jobs we desired to be in. At the time, it felt written in stone. We were best friends. It was only natural for us to stick together forever. But time went on. We ended up picking different high schools and taking on new extracurriculars that took up most of our free time. Hanging out twice or 3 times a week turned into hanging out every other week to hanging out once a month, and before we knew it, I was graduating high school and moving out of the city to attend university. Even though I was only meeting up with her like once a month at that point, the thought that I would no longer be a 5-minute walk away hit hard for both of us. Miraculously though, our friendship never changed. Sure, I only saw her like twice in 2023, but to this day, she's the only person I feel comfortable enough to call my best friend. Just like any friendship, we went through our fair share of emotional hurdles, moments of sourness, arguments, drama, gossip, but that only made me value our bond more as the years have gone by. She's my best friend. Nothing will ever change that. This is why I love Amphibia, and why it's so important to me. It shows that change and separation aren't what end friendships. The only thing that ends a friendship is a breakup. You can't predict where life takes you and whether or not it will create separation between you and your friend. What matters most is that you still cherish them and regard them the same way as you did before. Female friendships are especially intense, and that causes a lot of anxiety in young girls and femmes when they realize their seemingly perfect bond is changing all of a sudden. It's what makes girl drama an inevitable thing in adolescent female friendships. Things can get messy. Friends can become possessive of each other, and it ends up turning into a wild, emotional roller coaster of hormones and feelings, but what matters most are the lessons you learn from those messier experiences, and the bonds that last regardless of how things change. If you, the viewer, are going through something similar to anything I've described in this video, it's okay, and I promise it won't end up as badly as you think it will. Change, while scary, can be fun. I mean, if I didn't decide to stay up all night drafting a theoretical basal queer theory script, I wouldn't have discovered how much I enjoy putting my enthusiasm for fictional media into words. I feel like I can connect with the things I love on a much deeper level than before, and sharing that with like-minded people makes me genuinely happy. So I want to keep doing this. I want to get better at script writing and editing, better at talking in front of a camera, better at putting my feelings into words, and hopefully you'll stick around as I continue to explore this avenue of creativity. If you wish to support my work, then honestly, a comment on this video expressing your thoughts is support enough. But if you wish to go even further, I have links to my store and custom commission page and social medias in the description below. Other than that, I really appreciate you sticking around for so long, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video, whatever the hell that may be. Bye! Okay, we are done the Amphibia video, let's go!